Good evening and welcome to Realizing the View, Yogachar, Tathagata Garbha, and the Madhyamaka Synthesis. Part two of Realizing the View tonight. Since it's dune season, we'll do a little Mamo practice as is traditional in the Shedra, the Rime Shedra tradition. I'll screen share it and let's see. Vita, you wanna lead one round? Kate? No? Let's see. Cynthia, you want to lead around?
I think I could do one.
And then Mary Beth, and who wants to be third? Chris, you okay? Doing the final? Okay.
Are you going to be gonging at all? Bio. At the end of the 500-year dark age, when the secret mantra has strayed into Pun, when children do not listen to their parents' words, an evil time when relatives quarrel, when people dress sloppily in clothes of rags, eating bad, cheap food, when there are family feuds and civil wars, these provoke the Black Mammo's wrath. These various demons fill 1,000 realms, sending sickness upon humans and beasts. The sky is thick with purple clouds of sickness. They incite cosmic warfare. They destroy by causing the age of weaponry. Suddenly they strike people with fatal ulcerous sores. Completely daring, they bring down hail and thunderbolts. Earth lords, Nagas, and Yens are your subjects. The 8 classes, Devas, Rakshasas, and so on, are your retinue. There is nothing that you cannot subjugate. Whatever sickness there is comes from you, Mamos. Whatever plague there is comes from you, Mamos. Whatever blood there is comes from you, Mamos. Please change the course of evil and sickness. I make this offering so you may be appeased by the Samaya substances, Amrita and Torma, and the offerings of representations, appeasements, and practice materials. May the turmoil of the Mamos be pacified, be appeased. Samaya, through the blessings of appeasing you for us yogins and our disciples, may sickness cease and plague be averted. Erase us from your chart of doom, put away your dice. Please avert sickness, duns, and obstacles. Please avert evil prophecies and bad omens. May the misfortunes of the He-Maras be banished to the right. May the misfortunes of the She-Maras be banished to the left. May the misfortunes of all Maras be banished into space. Now is the time of great exorcism. Now is the time. Samaya, please perform the activities we request of you, overcome by ignorance from beginningless time, clouded by stupidity due to laziness. However, we have strayed from the path of omniscience. May the hosts of emanation Dakinis forgive us. Om Samaya Asamaya Hum Samaya Trag Raksha Kamundra Ekajati Nying Karagmo Byoja. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manapalaya Vajrasattva Tvenapatishta Dveda me bhava Satosha me bhava Saposha me bhava Anurakta me bhava Sarva Siddhim me Prayaksha Sarva Karmasu Chame Chitam Shreya Kuro Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajra Ma Me Muncha Vajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva Ah.
At the end of the 500-year dark age, when the secret mantra has strayed into pun, when children do not listen to their parents' words, an evil time when relatives quarrel, when people dress sloppily in clothes of rags, eating bad, cheap food, where there are family feuds and civil wars, these provoke the Black Momo's wrath. These various demons fill 1,000 realms, sending sickness upon humans and beasts. The sky is thick with purple clouds of sickness. They incite Cosmic warfare they destroy by causing the age of weaponry. Suddenly they strike people with fatal ulcerous sores. Completely daring, they bring down hail and thunderbolts. Earth lords, Nagas, and Neans are your subjects. The eight classes, Devas, Rakshasas, and so on are your retinue. There's nothing that you cannot subjugate. Whatever sickness there is comes from you, Mamos. Whatever plague there is comes from you, Mamos. Whatever blood there is comes from you, Mamos. Please change the course of evil and sickness. I make this offering so that you may be appeased by the Samaya substances, Amrita and Torma, and the offerings of representations, appeasements, and practice materials. May the turmoil of the Mamos be pacified, be appeased, Samaya. Through the blessings of appeasing you for us yogins and our disciples, may sickness cease and plague be averted. Erase us from your chart of doom. Put away your dice. Please avert sickness, duns, and obstacles. Please avert evil prophecies and bad omens. May the misfortunes of the Himars be banished to the right. May the misfortunes of the Shimars be banished to the left. May the misfortunes of all Mars be banished into space. Now is the time of great exorcism. Now is the time. Samaya, please perform the activities we request of you. Overcome by ignorance from beginningless time, clouded by stupidity due to laziness, however we have strayed from the path of omniscience, may the hosts of emanation, Dakinis, forgive us. Om Samaya Asamaya Hom Samaya Trag Raksha Kamundra Kajati Nin Karangmo Bioja Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manapulaya Vajrasattva Tino Me Pushta Drito Me Bhava Sutosha Me Bhava Sukosha Me Bhava Anurakta Me Bhava Sarva Siddha Me Prayacha Sarva Kam Masuche Ma Chidam Shreya Kuru Hom Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tatagava Vajra me muncha vajra bhava mahesamaya sattva. Ah.
Right. One more time. Chris, do you want to do your own ringing? Do you have a ringing device handy?
It's not handy.
No problem. Go for it.
Dio, at the end of the 500-year dark age, when the secret mantra has strayed into pun, when children do not listen to their parents' words, an evil time when relatives quarrel, when people dress sloppily in clothes of rags, eating bad, cheap food, when there are family feuds and civil wars, these provoke the Black Mammo's wrath. These various demons fill 1,000 realms, sending sickness upon humans and beasts. The sky is thick with purple clouds of sickness. They incite cosmic warfare. They destroy by causing the age of weaponry. Suddenly, they strike people with fatal ulcerous sores. Completely daring, they bring down hail and thunderbolts. Earth lords, Nyagas, and Yens are your subjects. The eight classes, Devas, Rakshasas, and so on are your retinue. There is nothing that you cannot subjugate. Whatever sickness there is comes from you, Mamos. Whatever plague there is comes from you, Mamos. Whatever blood there is comes from you, Mamos. Please change the course of evil and sickness. I make this offering so you may be appeased by the Samaya substances, Amrita and Torma, and the offerings of representations, appeasements, and practice materials. May the turmoil of the Mamos be pacified. Be appeased, Samaya. Through the blessings of appeasing you, for us yogins and our disciples, may sickness cease and plague be averted. Erase us from your chart of doom. Put away your dice. Please avert sickness, duns, and obstacles. Please avert evil prophecies and bad omens. May the misfortunes of the He-Mars be banished to the right. May the misfortunes of the She-Mars be banished to the left. May the misfortunes of all Mars be banished into space. Now is the time of the great exorcism. Now is the time, Samaya. Please perform the activities we request of you. Overcome by ignorance from beginningless time, clouded by stupidity due to laziness, however we have strayed from the path of omniscience, may the host of emanation Dakinis forgive us. Om Samaya, Ah Samaya, Hum Samaya, Tag Raksho, Kamundra, Ekajati, Ninkurdamo, Byo Om Vajrasattva Samayan Anapalaya Vajrasattva Tentopatishta Drido Me Baba Sutusho Me Baba Supusho Me Baba Anarakto Me Baba Sarvasiddham Me Prayacha Sarva Karma Chame Chidam Surai Kurohum Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajra Mami Muja Vajri Baba Maha Samaya Sattva Ah.
All right. Thank you. What? You want to chant? Yuki wants to lead the chants. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all our steps in the path of omniscience, may these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this.
I have a confession. I have a confession to make, which is that when we first we take refuge, because I'm so used to the dedication of merit, I put my hands on my thighs for the Manjushri supplication every time.
I noticed it this time. I didn't.
Every time I do, I'm like, I don't know how many more months it's going to take for me to not do that.
Yeah, he asked me about that. I said it's not a big deal. Manjushri, that is, not Chris. Hey, good evening, everyone. How's it going? How's your dun season going? So, once again, nobody got my email with the Zoom link. Is that right?
Actually, it came in just right at the end of the meditation session.
Yeah, I got it 44 minutes late after we started.
I don't know what's going on. I have a really good friend who's an amazing technician, computer technician, and dedicates some of his time to helping old farts like myself understand computers. So maybe I'll reach out to this friend and see if he can help me. But dang, it's the only class this has ever happened with, and continues to. Anyway, apologies. Thanks, Chris. And
But it doesn't happen with other emails that you send to anyone, right?
not that I know of. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, people many times have responded right away, indicating they got it very quickly. Yeah. So, um, so tonight we had two more renditions of the same, of the basic principles of the Yogacara tradition. So we've now had quite a few presentations of these, and hopefully they're becoming quite clear, or at least familiar, depending on whether you've studied these before. We had them in the presented by the sutra sources, the Sandhina Mochana, and and we had them in to some extent in the Lanka Avatar Sutra. And then we had them last week by the philosopher John Westerhoff. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Did I massacre his name? Jan Westinghouse. Is it Westinghouse? No, that's the oven. And tonight we had two presentations. One from this book, Being as Consciousness, Yogacara Philosophy of Buddhism, by a couple of Italian scholars, Fernando Tola and Carmen Dragonetti. I found it to be quite interesting because I didn't feel like it was that accurate. And for me, it sort of represented the way that a lot of Western scholars view the Yogacara. And I'm curious if other people had any reaction to them. Chris, do you want to chime in first with your reaction or comments?
You know, I had a similar reaction, and I actually thought it was almost the perfect setup for Karl Brunhaus, his kind of like takedown of this cliched,
Yeah.
yeah, telling of Yogacara.
Sorry,
Yeah, in
the cliche.
particular, the way that this telling of mind only turns it into ontological sort of theory that reifies the mind as something that exists on some level. And Karl Brunholz really pains himself to show that that is not the case.
Yeah, he certainly goes to great lengths to to explain that or to assert that, let's say.
Hmm.
Yeah. Other people reactions to that first reading? I thought basically we could focus on Carl's because I'm a Carl sycophant. Um, and I think his presentation is really good. And but any other comments or reactions to the Italians? You know, one thing that was interesting, or another thing that I found in their presentation was that they used the term Yogacara almost throughout instead of Chitta Matra, and which is not universally done. So I thought that was an interesting improvement, but there were a number of places where they explained like mind only as asserting the ontologically real status of the mind, right? But it's quite a thorough presentation, and we looked through the first half a couple of weeks ago, I think, and it was quite an amazing rundown on the various texts. And it was cool this night. He focuses on three texts in particular, which we'll be looking at in the next few weeks. So that was nice to see that we got them covered. So why don't we dive into Carl's, and this is from a little like pamphlet or booklet that I found on the web like a year or two ago or more, and I think it was on the Shambhala Publications website, and I downloaded it, and subsequently I don't find it on the internet anymore. I think they took it down. They have an amazing, Shambhala pubs and wisdom, have just become incredible resources, as is the rest of the internet, obviously. But Shambhala Publications, they have these little surveys. I can't remember what they call them, where they'll go through the literature of a certain teacher or a tradition. And, the only drawback is they only show the books that they've published, I think, instead of like admitting that there's others, which would be helpful in rounding them out because they don't obviously publish all of them, but they're extremely helpful. And they have a whole section dedicated to Carl and his presentation of the five dharmas, the five texts of Maitreya, which is really cool. Maybe afterwards I'll send you these links. But if you're interested, maybe I'll circulate this entire little document that I've excerpted a couple of sections from for Carl. I left out pieces. Cynthia.
Well, I think you can get it from the site of the place, the Dharma Books itself. I if you were saying that it used to be on Shambhala, but now it does seem to be on the Dharma Books site, where you can get it like an EPUB or a PDF.
Dharma Pubs being a separate publisher. Say
It's
that again.
the if you look at what you have, I think what you have in the um,
The syllabus is a link to something.
in the source book on the first page of this is the Carl's article thing you're talking
Yeah,
about, the
yeah, I give the
sunrays.
title page. Yeah.
So at the bottom, it basically shows
Oh,
the name
Dharma
of the
Books, yeah,
organization.
.org.
I think it's the Karmapas publishing arm in a sense, because they put out all kinds of stuff. Anyway, so it does look like it's on their site. Just
That's great to
FYI.
know. Thank you so much for
I'll
that. And
throw it in the chat again.
yeah, and check that out, folks, if you haven't
That
already, that site.
Chris beat me to it. Okay. Oh no, Mary Beth.
Thanks. Particularly if you know Tibetan, there's a huge number of books in Tibetan. But thanks for that, Cynthia. So our focus begins on page, what is it, 18? the main elements of the Yogacara teachings. Chris, do you want to go through this one first and I'll follow, and then I'll go through the three natures first and you follow?
Sure, sounds good.
Skim through it, or however.
This is what you're witnessing right now is Derek and I lesson planning.
Right. Don't tell them that.
So
machine.
So this is I think all the other presentations, or the other two presentations we've looked at, open with Chitta Mantra, more or less. And Karl Brunholz takes a sort of different strategy here. I'm just going to read from this first paragraph. That the mind, the world is merely the mind's own play. That the mind is continually involved in the essentially deluded, dualistic, and illusory activity of projecting or constructing its own world is highlighted by the Yogacara terms parikalpa, conception or imagination, and abhuti parikalpa, false imagination. And this term parikalpa should be somewhat familiar to you because it is. Well, Derek, you're the Sanskrit speaker. What is there a relation between parikalpa and parikalpita?
Parikalpita is we usually have the term parikalpita.
Yeah.
He gives parikalpa, and he's now famous for doing this. Is finding there's a number of things where he's like gone back and corrected the correct Sanskrit terms. Like prananati and bindu. We encountered this, and I think we did a course something or other on Dharma Dharmatava Bangu by Vibhanga by Maitreya, and we used some stuff by Carl, and he says prananati and bindu are not the correct Sanskrit. And so I think that's what he's doing here, where normally it's parikalpita. And I think those are two different grammatical versions of the same term.
But this is a term that folks may have encountered before as the third of the three natures, the imagined nature. So he's opening by highlighting this term and saying that it includes all eight consciousnesses with their mental factors and functions, as well as their objects. In essence, they indicate the mind's own confused play that constantly creates all kinds of appearances of subject and object. So from the very beginning, he is saying that everything that we think of as mind is contained within the imagined nature. Is so sort of opening with this strong kind of anti-realist move, where other presentations are opening with sort of a realist move of all is mind, all, sort of an idealist presentation. This is saying all is imaginary, and yes, sure, everything is mind, but mind is without root too. And then he sort of addresses this. That everything is mind's imagination or creation leads to the most well-known but also most misunderstood notion of the Yogacara school, Chitta Mantra, or Vijnapti Mantra. It is often taught that this term means that outer objects do not exist and that everything is mind only, with mind being the only thing that really ultimately exists. However, this is not really what the Yogacara school itself says. I'll just keep reading this. Though Chitta Mantra, mere mind, or Vijnapti Mantra, mere cognition, means indeed that the existence of material outer objects is denied. The full scope and purpose of teaching Chitta Mantra is much vaster, the realization of personal and phenomenal identitylessness. In this process, mere mind itself is no exception to being identityless, and is thus ultimately as unreal as anything else. Chittamatra is not a metaphysical assertion of a transcendental reality consisting of mind only, but a description of our delusions, the dream of this sleep from which a Buddha has awakened. If the dream world of samsara is merely mind, freedom and the Buddhist path are possible because we can change our minds through creating a counter dream within the dream of our delusion. Most important, we can wake up from this dream. So this is sort of a different presentation, and I found it extremely refreshing and somewhat encouraging. Last week, Morgan proposed that maybe we shouldn't be creating new schemes and new projects, and that we should instead be deconstructing in the mode of Nagarjuna. And this seems to suggest that the Yogacara project is actually a deconstruction project as well. And first, by acknowledging that the world we perceive takes place in the mind, and then deconstructing the mind itself.
I love the part at the end about freedom and the Buddhist path are possible because we can change our minds through creating a counter dream within the dream. So what does he mean by that, and what do you guys think of that possibility? What's a counter dream? Is that a dream that you put on the kitchen counter, or like really good food for dinner when you forgot to cook or something? What's the counter dream? Don't be shy.
I think it's a dream that moves you further along the path.
Right, in this case, what is that dream?
Like, so, well, that would be, if you go through the bhumis or you go through various teachings, at each step you have insight into the next step. I mean, at some place here he says the Yogacara is not really on dealing with ontology, but it's soteriological, meaning, it's a technique to move you along, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And anyone else? What is that dream in this case? The counter dream, Cynthia.
Well, in the ordinary samsaric sort of dream, we think of ourselves as single and solid and permanent and all those things. So we have these, those kind of concepts. And so I would think that this counter dream would be the unraveling of the mistaken views.
That's the unraveling, yeah. Chris, what do you make of the counter dream? What's
I think
yours?
the counter dream is the entire Buddhist path and view. So the counter dream is things such as emptiness, things such as bhumis, all
The
of
whole
those are
conceptual artifice,
the whole conceptual artifice,
including Alaya Vijnana, the eight consciousnesses, the three natures, seeds, all this fun stuff that the Yogacaras call.
Madhyamaka, Yogacara, all of
Yeah, the Madhyamaka mostly like take down the dream, and the Abhidharmas create a dream, and the sort of the Yogacharans create a dream. And when we come to Alaya Vijnana, let's remember to go back to the Abhidharmas, Bhavanga, and hence. It's like being muted in a dream, like, right? Like trying it.
He was saying that we just create a new dream out of the other dreams. He's not saying to stop dreaming and stop the illusion. It's like the illusion's there, so maybe enjoy it. I don't know.
I think the last line is the key, though. Most importantly, we can wake up from the dream by creating counter dreams. They can counter our delusion, and we can wake up. and then you can enjoy the dreams even more. Chris, go for it.
Top of page 81, source page 20. Many Yogacara works make it clear explicitly and repeatedly that not only external objects, but also mere mind does not exist and is to be relinquished in order to attain the realization of the path of seeing and eventually Buddhahood. In this context, the four practices.
Can I
Yep.
chime in here and there so I don't have to like go all the way back?
Yeah.
Chime in. So just briefly, mere mind. Very interesting that he's using that term, right? So he's using that as the translation of Chitta mantra. Chitta is mind, mantra is he's translating as mere. Most translators use only, mind only. And this term mere has a special significance. Chris, you want to talk about that? The meaning of mere.
Sounds like you have something in mind.
Okay. So mere has become like this way of describing something, sort of identifying something, which technically is like a conceptual isolate, without reifying it. And it's famous first from the Madhyamaka tradition, where they say, once you understand that all phenomena are empty, then you understand that their appearance is mere appearance. It's appearance without entity-ness behind it. And instead of like saying that mind only exists, he's saying even mind is empty by saying mere mind. It's a very, sort of the goes along with his whole slant on the topic.
I think it's like we really need to put a pin in this whole first section and bring it along with us when we get to the last section, because he will move from this dismissal of mere mind as an ontologically existent thing, and then give us a very detailed and robust presentation of Tathagata and understanding to what extent we can make sense of a difference between those things is going to be important and is sort of at the heart of the debate that takes place in Tibet later on. So, putting that aside, in this context, the four practices, Sanskrit pra-yoga, in Yogacara works are the following four steps of realization, and these may sound a little familiar. 1. Outer objects are observed to be nothing but mind. 2. Thus, outer objects are not observed as such. 3. With outer objects not being observable, a mind cognizing them is not observed either. 4. Not observing both, non-duality is observed. Does this scheme feel familiar to anyone? Cynthia.
Sounds a little bit like those four Vipassana steps that we're always talking about, except it's a little, I don't know, maybe a little bit different in the
Yeah, slightly different, maybe.
yeah, the
The
last
four
couple are a little
steps,
different, but the first couple are similar.
Yeah, the mile markers are kind of in different places, but sort of the same progression, right?
and the four steps are outlined in the four bodhicitta slogans, meditation slogans of Atisha, and they are: send your regards to your dreams. No, regard all dharmas as dreams. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. Liberate even the antidote, and rest in the nature of Alaya.
The essence.
Right. Rests in the essence, not the nature of life. Rests in the
No.
essence.
No,
Rest in
no,
the
it is
nature of
the
Alia,
nature. It is
the
the nature.
essence.
The essence. Thank you.
It's like a subtitle. The essence. Yeah. And then in post meditation, be a child of illusion. Um, kind of how you take the show on the road with you. Carrying on. Okay, so that means that stages 1 through 3 of that list we just looked at, and thus the notion of Jitra Mantra, are progressively dealt with only up to the end of the path of preparation. So here he's superimposing these 4 stages onto the paths of the path, the stages of the path.
The traditional 5 stages, which
5 stages.
are the path of
Hearing,
accumulation,
accumulating,
accumulation,
path of
path of
unification,
unification or preparation, path of seeing,
path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning.
no more classes, no more teachers.
Yeah, you don't have to show up anymore. Your Tuesday nights are open. So the stages 1 through 3 are dealing with those first 2 stages. And then stage 4, which is not observing both being outer objects and the mind cognizing them, not observing both, non-duality is observed. That marks the path of seeing, also known as the first bhumi, to add another scheme, on which the bodhisattvas have let go of the notion of citta matra as well. In other words, like so many other Buddhist notions, citta matra is no exception to simply being an expedient pedagogic tool to realize a certain level on the path. However, it is neither the final realization nor to be reified in any way, thus becoming an obstacle to this very realization, but to be discarded once its intended function has been accomplished. Mary Beth, were you saying something?
You can't keep the boat with you.
Can't keep the boat with you. Can't have your boat and eat it too. Derek, you want to do this next section?
Oh, sorry, I'm still muted. Mind's play has many faces. So false imagination is the most general term for mind's deluded mode of operation. Parikalpita or parikalpa is further divided in several ways in terms of various functions. These are descriptions of the dynamic processes of the mind and not any kinds of static entities or states. Thus, when we talk about the 8 consciousnesses, we don't mean, in no way mean that there's 3, 5, or 8 distinct different minds, or even just static properties of a single mind. Right? The idea of dividing mind into little boxes is not an accurate way of understanding the senses. Rather, different numbers of consciousness stand for different functions of the mind, all of which operate as momentarily permanent and changing processes, and none of which is truly existent.
I remember there was a quote from Zongsar Khyentse about, we talk about the 5 skandhas, but there's actually 1,000 skandhas.
Neat. Thankfully, the Buddha summed them up into 5. That would have been quite a difficult task if we had to understand all 1,000 of them. So here we have the Alaya consciousness as the most basic ground of samsaric mind, while the other 7 consciousnesses operate out of this ground and engage their objects, each their own respective objects, which are also nothing but different aspects of the basic ground, right? So when we talk about the other seven consciousnesses having objects, they're perceiving different aspects of Alaya, since there's nothing outside of the Alaya being the complete container. So when we have these two terms, Alaya and Alaya consciousness, so Alaya consciousness would be the consciousness of the Alaya being the fundamental ground, the most basic ground. So Carl says it's the most basic ground of samsaric mind. It's the Alaya Vijnana, the consciousness of that ground. At the bottom of that page, the Alaya consciousness is nothing but the sum total of all the positive, negative, and neutral tendencies that make up the mind stream of a being. It's not a container separate from its contents, but it's an analogy, right? It's not a place. It resembles the constant flow of all the water drops that are labeled a river. So instead of using the container analogy of a storehouse, Carl likes the river analogy that there is no river, there's just a stream of water droplets that seem to occupy a sort of general area.
The river also has a dynamic quality. It's constantly flowing, which is more in line with how this presentation versus a storehouse. Things are just sort of sitting around and getting dusty.
Dusty, right? If you lose them,
Hopefully,
you can't find them.
hopefully they get called on someday and brought to the loading dock.
Dust them off and bring them out. When there's dualistic interactions of subjects and objects through the other seven consciousnesses. So, let's see. He didn't explain that, but there is no dualistic interaction, right? We should talk to him about this.
Well,
These are,
isn't it just that within the mind, even within the context of mind, it splits it into the sense of there being a perceiving and a perceived. Isn't that the way that it's
I would sort of agree with the way you explain that. In my mind, the word sense is similar to mirror. There's like an apparent division.
because essentially the way I understand it is that
It's not really dualistic.
that split is where we're still deluded by having that split, because otherwise if we didn't, we would be with Samantabhadra in
But we would still walk around and experience a phenomena in our Alaya Vijnana, in our
Well,
Alaya.
but
this
not being deluded that they're separate.
Right.
in this sentence, he's describing how these impressions are merged back into and stored in the Alaya. And
That's a next step. That's sort of like when what is created by those interactions of seeming subject object, then whatever happens, so-called, that's the storing up of the imprints from whatever
right.
happens. That's the sort of karmic collection thing.
But I think we could extrapolate from this that when dualistic perception does not take place, no new seeds are sown in the Alaya. So this sentence is sort of a description about how the Alaya gets repopulated.
Yeah. Good. You go shopping for objects. The imprints created by them merge back into and are stored in the Alaya. Here we have the storehouse version, just as waves on a river emerge and reemerge. It doesn't mean the Alaya creates anything, it's just a dynamic network of various causes and conditions interacting, otherwise known as dependent origination. And we know from our study of Madhyamaka that dependent origination is the opposite of the reification of phenomena as being dependently originated, or that there is anything that is a cause or a condition or a result. Cynthia.
I just wanted to check in this context. You were talking before about Alaya as the most basic ground, and then the Alaya Vishnana being the basic ground of the samsaric mind. And here he's using Alaya. So is that saying that the storing from what he's saying is in the Alaya, not the Alaya Vishnana? Or do you think he's using shorthand?
No, I think this makes sense that the Alaya is the storehouse, and the consciousness is aware of it.
Okay, just checking because
But are you referring to the scheme that we get from Trungpa Rinpoche of fundamental Alaya as a sort of level one lower than the Alaya Vijnana?
well, that's what I think you meant, Derek, when you were talking about the ground, the most basic ground,
I
the
think
sort of
so. Yeah, I
layer
think
below the.
that would be in correlation with Trungpa Rinpoche's presentation
Mm-hmm.
of the fundamental Alaya. Well, when he does that, he's slightly indicating that there's various versions of Alaya as being beyond samsaric mind. And he's sort of slipping back and forth between them in a slightly unclear way. So, in his presentation, he says there's the Alaya and then there's the fundamental Alaya. And so fundamental Alaya wouldn't have any seeds. Fundamental Alaya would be sort of Buddha nature, basic goodness, and not basic goodness, Buddha nature, and regular Alaya would be where we store our seeds. But the Yogacara doesn't actually, to my knowledge, make that fine decision of distinction of there being two different Alayas. But it does say there's an Alaya versus the Alaya Vishnana. And so let's segue. So I circulated some stuff on the Abhidharma conception of there being a base consciousness called the Bhavanga or the Jivana. And as an example of another tradition coming up with basically a very similar understanding of experience as a skillful means for working with experience on the path. And one of the most interesting comments I saw in there, in one of the websites I gave a link to, was, I think it was the one that had Bhikkhu Bodhi extracts from his translation of the Abhidhamma to Sangaha, which was that arhats or advanced meditators have actually experienced the Bhavanga in their meditative travels, let's say, which is similar to what the Yogacarans say, that they in practice they actually experience the Alaya Vijnana. Now, there's two ways to take that. One is that, and you might say this maybe is the Abhidharma way of taking it, is that the Bhavanga would be like a dharma in that it has a reality to it, just like all the other dharmas in the Abhidharma scheme have swabhava. And they reify and ontologicalize it, so to speak. However, ideally, in the understanding of the Yogacara tradition, that is not happening. And there's still this idea of mirror throughout all the different ways that they describe their experience of different aspects of mind and the functioning of mind. One of the other differences is that Bhavanga was said to be a state of mind that appears when the mind is at rest and not engaged with objects. Whereas in the Yogacara tradition, the Alaya Vijnana is said to be a continuous stream of moments of Alaya Vijnana-ness, while, let's say, the seventh consciousness, in the form of this term, the immediate mind, travels through the other six consciousnesses, thinks about, sees things, hears things, thinks about them, plans to see and hear other things, and so on and so forth. But in all those mind moments, there's a continuity of the moments of the Alaya Vijnana, and it's not unchanging, but it is a stream of uninterrupted stream of moments, which is only interrupted at Buddhahood. The Alaya Vijnana vanishes for good. Any other comments on the Bhavanga? Does anyone know how to do the Bhavanga? Cynthia, will you demonstrate for it?
Um, I did not get through all of it, so this is only partial, but it was interesting that reading the different takes on it, at first it sounded, or I mean, in some cases it sounded like it was kind of like a placeholder, between moments of consciousness of objects, that it was sort of like a placeholder that they put in just because there had to be something when there wasn't anything happening, right? Um, but then other takes on it were made it sound much more like the Alaya Vijnana in terms of carrying the whole identity with it, moment to moment. So
Yeah, yeah,
it was kind of
those,
interesting, the different takes on it. I mean, I'm ignoring
yeah,
the unconscious parts, but where they talked about
yeah,
unconsciousness.
that was very interesting. There's clearly a development in the utilization of that concept, which initially begins as a way of explaining why is it that when you go into the absorption state beyond perception and non-perception, there's zero cognitive activity, and then you rise from that state and you still think you're the same person. How did that happen? What's the continuity in those different sequences of mind? They logically reason there must be something that was continuing that provides the basis for that experience of continuity. And then later on, it becomes much more like the Alaya Vijnana in terms of it being sort of in the background all the time. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for that. Mary Beth.
Is it like the stillness of the movement and the stillness of Mahamudra?
It is a little bit. I think they would say it's that depending on how you understand the stillness in Mahamudra. Mahamudra has the basic scheme in Mahamudra is understand the still mind and the moving mind, and then the awareness, that triad. But it depends how you understand the still mind, and there's variations in that. One is that like the still mind is the clear, conscious mind that just is not distracted by thoughts, by any content. And that's very different than the jhana state, the absorption state of no perception and non-perception, where there's no clarity, no mental clarity at all. There's no registration. But
Well,
that's it.
so
Interesting.
the Bhavanga is more like a jhana state then?
Well, it was the first way of describing the Bhavanga was that um, yeah, actually, they do describe it as happening whenever the mind is still, and that the mind has to be woken up by. Some of us have read other versions of this where there's like 17 impulsions of sense of other consciousnesses that then wake you up out of the Bhavanga. So it's a little unclear how to compare that or how to understand the Bhavanga, but this is sort of an interesting phenomenon that they come up with.
And they also tied it to the time of death which is also similar to the Alaya Vijnana. There was some mention of how it in some way functions as I don't know, the impetus to the next life or something like that.
Right, right. Well,
And
it carries it's the description of it as the continuity between deep absorption states is the it is the explanation of how karmic propensities get retained and transferred from one moment to another of a consciousness.
which is where it
So that
again
would
sounds very
continue.
similar to the Alaya Vijnana.
Oh, there, Vijnana, exactly. Yeah. So let's continue. Doesn't mean that Ollie actively creates anything. It's just a dynamic network of cause and conditions interacting, dependent origination. So it's equivalent to fundamental ignorance and the karma accumulated by it. It's an interesting way of looking at all of Vijnana as fundamental ignorance, thus serving as the basis for all samsaric experience. And thus it is the sum total of all that needs to be relinquished in order to depart from samsara and achieve nirvana. Let's see, the afflicted mind is simply another expression for mind not recognizing its own nature. Technically, it's the consciousness that solely focuses inward and mistakes the empty aspect of the alaya consciousness as being a self, and its lucid aspect as being what is other. So, alaya consciousness said to have these two aspects of being the basic aspects of mind of being clear and aware, empty and knowing. And the empty aspect he just talked about, and he's called the knowing aspect as the lucid aspect. And that those get misunderstood as being subject and object. As this, the emptiness as being a self, and its lucid aspect is the content. Usually we think that not seeing or recognizing something is due to being too far away from it, but the afflicted mind is the most fundamental case of not recognizing something due to being too close to it. Being deluded about the nature of our own mind because we're in that mind and we actually are unable normally to look at that mind, but we look out from it. This is the starting point of fundamental subject-object duality, which then ramifies, ramifies. That's a funny word, isn't that? Ramifies into the appearances of the remaining six consciousness and their objects, all of them being constantly filtered and afflicted through this basic self-absorption or concern. So I'm on page 23 of the source text. Thus, the afflicted mind is constantly associated with these four afflictions: ignorance, the views about a real personality, self-conceit, and attachment to a self, which is an interesting list because three of them sound identical. But it's not a commonly used list. It's interesting that he provides this. And the afflicted mind, me and mine, is the root of all the other afflictions that must be relinquished to achieve samsara. This next paragraph, he talks about there's these two aspects of the seventh consciousness that are very slippery and subtle. And it was very interesting to see his explanation of these. Though the term mentation is primarily used for the afflicted mind, so his term afflicted mind is seventh consciousness, klishta manas in Sanskrit. in Yogacara texts, it is also generally used for the mental sense faculty. So, particularly in the tradition before Yogacara, mentation is a general term describing any of the functioning of the mind or all of the functioning of the mind. It's generally used for the mental sixth sense, rather, faculty, equivalent to the immediate condition. And so the immediate condition is a reference to the four types of conditions in the causal scheme of the Abhidharma, right? You have the object condition, is the phenomena that you're experiencing. You have the sense space that you experience it with as the dominant condition, let's say the eye sense faculty or the mental sense faculty. And then you have the causal condition. It's like what makes it so that you, as the perceiver, or like the eye sense faculty, sees an object, the object condition. Presumably light reflected from the object enters the eye. So that's the object condition. And then, because consciousness can't arise out of nothing, it can't just appear. It has to come out of a prior moment of consciousness. And so they use this term, the immediately preceding condition. The condition that existed in the moment before is another type of consciousness. Let's say it was, you're thinking about something and then somebody turns on the light and you see that person. And that becomes the current moment of cognition. And so he's using this term immediate condition as a name for an aspect of the seventh consciousness that I think we would basically call attention. That there's part of that seventh consciousness is a general faculty of paying attention, and then that would get transferred to other types of consciousnesses like visual and mental consciousnesses. So it's mentation is generally used for the mental sense faculty in the sense of any of the first six consciousnesses having just ceased. Then there's the mental consciousness, the seventh consciousness. In brief, mentation can either designate the mental sense faculty, the afflicted mind, or the seventh consciousness as consisting of both the afflicted mind and the immediate condition of the mental consciousness. Basically, completely confusing presentation. Now, there's a few of us here who have read a number of times texts by Trungpa Rinpoche, who is the only other person I've ever seen that refers to these two types of the seventh consciousness. And his translator uses the term the immediate mind as this one aspect of the seventh consciousness, trying to mean it's the mind that's like immediately aware of what's going on every moment. And it's probably more confusing than it's helpful to other people to see Carl's presentation because it is somewhat confusing. So we'll go on. But just the last sentence, he says, one aspect of the seventh consciousness, i.e. mentation, the afflicted mind is the support for consciousness being afflicted, and the other aspect of mentation, in its being the mental sense faculty, is what triggers all kinds of consciousnesses. And this way of dividing the sense consciousness, seventh rather consciousness, into two types has various ramifications in the tradition that we'll pass on for now, but something like interesting that you may encounter later on in your path. The mind operates in three levels. The three natures of the characteristics are the main Yogacara template to explain mind's operational modes when diluted and undiluted. So he cuts right to the chase. These three natures are descriptions of the mental operation. Most other descriptions of these three natures present them as if they're the three natures of all of reality, of all phenomena. Now, if you're, connecting the dots, you would say, well, there is no external phenomena, and so the three natures are about the mind. But that's not often well understood, and I think a lot of people, when we talk about the three natures, start to think about like phenomena in general. And so he starts from this interesting way of presenting the three natures as being, these are descriptions of the mental experience, the mind's operational modes. So the imaginary nature, the dependent, and the perfect nature. Yogacara texts present us with a great number of sometimes very different presentations of what these are and how they relate. However, we keep in mind that all of these models describe processes rather than three clearly separate and fixed things or realities. Their descriptions are not contradictory, but just emphasize different aspects of the same dynamics. The dependent nature is the process or experiential structure in which the world presents itself as a seeming delusive reality for beings whose minds have a dualistic perceptual structure, i.e. the imaginary nature, deluded sentient beings like myself. The perfect nature is the underlying fundamental process or structure of mind's true nature and its own expressions as they are unwarped by those dualistic perceptual structures. So here he gets a little close to the mind being a thing, or the perfected nature being a thing. And it's a little bit of a slippery slope, this perfected nature. So we'll see how he gets himself out of this bind here. In other words, the dependent nature is the basic stuff or stratum of, I think there's a word missing here, of, a little word of, or stratum of all our samsaric experiences and appearances. Stratum that all of our appearances and experiences are made of. It's the mistaken imagination that appears as the unreal entities of subject and object, because these are appearances in dependence on the latent tendencies of ignorance. So they're all mentally created and manifested. The dependent nature appears as an outer world with its various beings and objects, bodies, and sense consciousnesses that perceive the supposed objects, and the conceptual consciousness that thinks about them, thinks they're real. It clings to a self and clings to phenomena as real, and various mental events such as feelings that accompany all of these consciousnesses, various conscious experiences. Then he has in parentheses, and the alaya consciousness is sometimes said to be the equivalent of the dependent nature, which might be helpful, that the alaya vijnana, in the sense of the storehouse consciousness where everything happens, is the dependent nature, and the imaginary nature is the mistaken belief or experience or thought that the experiences that one has are really this and that, and not understanding that they're just various morphs or variations in the alaya vijnana. And the fully perfected nature then is the clear understanding that our experience is the alaya vijnana, and thereby not being fooled by it and not experiencing the phenomena or the appearances or the gyrations, let's say, of the alaya vijnana as being anything real. Thus, false imagination is what creates the basic split of bare experience into seemingly real perceivers that apprehend seemingly real objects. This duality of subject and object does not even which is the imaginary shape does not even exist on the level of seeming reality, but the mind that creates that split does exist and functions on this level of the dependent. However, the dependent nature in no way exists ultimately, since it's repeatedly described as illusion-like, and so on is said to be what it is to what it is said to be what is to be relinquished, while the perfect nature is to what is to be revealed. So we don't create the perfected nature, we don't develop the perfected nature, we don't import it, but it's there and it's uncovered, it's revealed. Skipping ahead some since our time, there's fade in here on, let's see. Let's shift to the bottom of page 29 of the source text. Oh, actually, sorry, one paragraph at the bottom of 26. The perfect nature is emptiness in the sense that what appears as dependent false imagination is primordially never established as the imaginary nature, so primordially from the beginning. As the ultimate object and the true nature of the dependent nature, this emptiness is the sphere of non-conceptual wisdom, which is nothing other than phenomenal identitylessness. It's a funny little terminology, like the ultimate object. So so emptiness is the ultimate non-object, and it's the true nature of the dependent nature, emptiness, and it's the sphere of non-conceptual wisdom. And there's a little bit of an implication that non-conceptual wisdom has an object, which is emptiness. And this is a common way of describing things, particularly in the Madhyamaka tradition. And it's interesting that he's repeating this here. But this is something that will come up later when we go into Tibet and see how Tibetans dealt with this whole thing of like, is emptiness an experience? In some sense, emptiness is that which liberates sentient beings by their understanding of it or their experiencing of it, and that experiencing is called non-conceptual wisdom, primordial wisdom, prajna. And is it a subject-object experience? No, it can't be that, but somehow they need to describe it, and there's often this clunky way of referring to it as an object, which is nothing other than
The criticism that's going to come up in Tibet is that this is just a way of smuggling reification in through the back door.
I like the way you put that. To get by the tariffs.
That's
subject
right.
to the tariffs. Okay, that makes sense. It is called perfect because it never changes into something else. It is the supreme among all dharmas. Another phrase that we'll see a lot, the supreme among all dharmas, translated in various ways. Emptiness, the supreme of all dharmas, and is the focal object of prajna. The focal object of prajna during the process of purifying the mind from adventitious stains. Just as space is without distinctions, but conventionally may be presented as twofold: the unchanging perfect nature, suchness, and the unmistaken perfect nature, the non-dual, non-conceptual wisdom that realizes that suchness. So some way of describing that falls into many traps, but at times the perfect nature is also equated with the luminous nature of mind, free from adventitious stains, or Buddha nature. Huh. Let's see. So this description goes on and on. Chris, did you have any, it goes until page 32 where he brings up the five dharmas. So anything else in his three natures you wanted to touch on before we move on?
Well, it's interesting the way specifically in our conversation about how Yogacara relates with Madhyamaka. In this next paragraph, he goes on to talk about um, how Yogacara relates with the Prajnaparamita Sutra's key notion of lack of emptiness. This is sort of the middle of that next paragraph.
Yeah.
The Prajnaparamita Sutra's key notion of lack of emptiness is not to be understood literally in the sense of nothing existing at all. Rather, it needs to be interpreted correctly through understanding this threefold lack of nature in order to relinquish the extremes of superimposition, and denial. That is, to prevent clinging to, one, the existence of the imaginary nature, and two, the non-existence of those phenomena whose nature it is to be inexpressible. The non-existence of those phenomena whose nature it is to be inexpressible. So this seems to be indicating that the Prajnaparamita is about dismantling conceptual ideas, dualistic ideas, but that there may be non-conceptual, non-dual so-called things that are not dismantled by the Prajnaparamita, and that's what's being proposed here in the Yogacara and in this section on the perfected nature. And I think that the real question that needs to be continuously applied is why would the criticism of Madhyamaka not apply to those sorts of things? How do they evade that trap? Continuing, this points to two of the main misconceptions that explain why the Yogacaras saw a need to interpret the message of the Prajnaparamita Sutra in terms of the three natures. Since these sutras themselves teach one to reject what is afflicted and practice or adopt what is pure in terms of the path, it makes no sense to simply take emptiness to mean that nothing whatsoever exists on any level of reality because there is nothing to adopt or reject. Thus, given the emptiness of all phenomena on the ultimate level, the existence of skandhas, karmic actions, a person, adopting, rejecting, and so on, can only be and must be accepted on the level of seeming reality. However, within that level, one needs to further distinguish clearly between mere imaginary labels, such as the person, and the functional phenomena, such as skandhas and actions, that are taken to be the basis for such labeling and perform the functions to be worked with on the path, even though both do not exist ultimately, and neither does the path, which nevertheless leads to realization of the ultimate.
Yeah, that's a big issue that comes up here and then a lot later on as well is that conventional illusory nature, conventional reality in terms of the two truths scheme glosses over the or includes like this wide range of experiences of completely imaginary things like unicorns as well as functional entities. And early on, there's no sort of acknowledgement of the different levels of those two types of phenomena in terms of at least utility. And so that's one of the reasons for this development of these three natures. Morgan.
That was one of the things I was thinking about, and on sourcebook 31, I came across the census about half, two-thirds of the way down. From the perspective of the path, the imaginary nature is to be known for what it is, utterly non-existent. And it struck me two things about that, or two different perspectives about that. One is from a Madhyamaka perspective, you're saying that the imaginary nature doesn't exist, which means we've actually found a thing that has an ontological status. So it's not empty. Because if it was empty, it would be non-existent, it would neither exist nor not exist. But we're saying, no, this actually is a thing that really doesn't exist. And that seems
wrong. And looking at it from a Yogacara perspective, um, I don't know how you would say that a unicorn is any less real than a dream. I mean, they're both appearances, they're both perceptions. We both have them as we have them both as perceptions, and neither of them actually exists. So I don't know how you would draw that distinction.
That is cool. So, many of you have taken a number of courses in the Rime Shadra, and we've gone through a scheme of approaching the Abhidharma called the Dudra in Tibetan is the collected topics. And there's been this famous chart that Karl Brunholzl put together for Natarta Institute, where he does like a organizational chart of phenomena. And separate from that, or similarly, there's a way in the Madhyamaka tradition of saying that only what appears is empty, and what doesn't appear, and only what is empty appears. And when they say that, only what appears is empty, and only what is empty appears, they're saying that all phenomena are empty. But they're also indicating, implicating, but not saying that there are things that don't appear that we can talk about. The word things is a poor choice. We have words that have no referent, is the way it's normally described. And so that's what Morgan you picked up on as being non-existent. So in this tradition, those you can't really use the word phenomena. Those conceptual isolates are non-existent, but they don't have ontological status. It's not a way of giving them ontological status. It's saying that those conceptual isolates don't have ontological status, nor are they empty, because they have absolutely no reality to them.
But I would go one step further than that and say that unicorns do appear. If I
Let's
say
talk
unicorn,
about
you have a
that.
picture, you have a picture in your mind. And that's no more or less real than the dream I had last night.
So what it when
They do appear, otherwise we wouldn't refer to them. I would argue that every word has a referent, even if that a referent exists only in our mind. But from the Yogacara perspective, everything only exists in our mind. So I'm not clear where the distinction is being drawn between particularly dependent and imaginary, but even between ultimate and imaginary or dependent. I mean, I think actually one of the reasons I think I find Madhyamaka so appealing is I just can't get the three natures. I just I've been through it so many times and it just doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't get it. I kind of get two truths, although I kind of want to reduce that to one, but three, three natures, I'm just lost.
Yeah, so in Madhyamaka world, this comes down to uh, the way that they relate to the relative is by common consensus. And they say don't analyze the relative, just accept it based on common consensus.
Well,
Oh, you guys believe there's a unicorn there? Sure. Oh, fine. Okay. I'll
but
go, I'll
I,
play
I
along.
I think even that's a softening of what's in the Karakas. The Karaka says just don't say anything at all about it. Don't even judge whether it's common, commonly accepted.
Well, if somebody asks you, do you want ketchup or mustard, then what?
Right, but how do I know if that's all happening in my head?
You don't. Or hopefully you know it is only
Yeah, but
happening in your
I,
head.
I guess
But
what I'm
are you going to
saying,
say anything if I ask you that?
No, I would answer, but but
Which one?
that doesn't explain anything. That doesn't imply any causality. That doesn't imply any dependence. At least not from the perspective of the Karakas.
No,
Things just happen. And like Westerhoff was saying,
where was I
we
going? I
we
can't
we
remember.
we, we take on we identify this notion of regularity, and from that project the notion of cause and effect. But even the regularity, I mean, who knows what you're perceiving as opposed to what I'm perceiving?
Oh, so here's the common consensus. So by common consensus, you and I both know whether the mustard is on the left or the ketchup is on the left, right? By common consensus. And consensus is not uh, verifiable. It's not authentic. No, it's not authoritarian. What's the word? It's not definitive
Hmm.
because by definition, it's not doesn't prove anything. Just because most of us see, certain colors in a certain way doesn't mean that it's has any reality.
Right, it can't be established.
And people that have defective or defective sense faculties is only defective from the point of view of common consensus. And so common consensus is that unicorns are not experienceable outside of our own minds.
Hmm. But that's just common consensus.
And that's the way everything is related to in Madhyamaka world, is by common consensus. And so when you and I talk about unicorns, unicorns exist as a word, a sound, and
And
they,
as a generally characterized phenomena.
right, and generally characterized phenomena in Madhyamaka have no existence.
But
Similarly,
nor does, well, no, in Madhyamaka, nothing has, I don't think there's anything that has no existence, because that would be not empty.
it's not empty. You can't
Because
say whether it's empty or not empty.
I'm not sure I follow.
A generally characterized phenomena is the referent of a concept. So
Right.
a unicorn is a concept, and it has no referent based on common consensus.
Well,
Ketchup and mustard have a referent based on common consensus.
I mean, I guess the distinction I would draw is I can't ride a unicorn the way I could ride a horse, but I can picture a unicorn just as well as I can picture a horse. And so the concept of a unicorn exists. I mean, or appears, doesn't exist, it appears in the same way that the concept of a horse appears.
No,
And
no,
so therefore is empty.
yes, but the referent, you can't say whether the referent is empty or not.
Right.
Anyway, we diverge.
A bit, yes. Sorry.
We can discuss this basically every class from now on. This could come up because the whole scheme comes up over and over again.
I think the key point is that the Yogacaras are not making necessarily an ontological distinction, but a real sort of practical distinction about the path and about things that can be worked on. So, notions such as unicorns are the self, completely imaginary, can't be worked on, but things in the world, such as meditation halls and the bus and your family, those are real practical things, and having some way of distinguishing them, even if it's not an ontological one, can be helpful in terms of achieving the goal of the path. And there's a quote that I really liked at the end of the big full paragraph on page 91, source book page 91. Fundamentally, all phenomena, including one's own mind, have always been, are, and will always be empty. But this fact alone makes nobody a Buddha, unless it is made into an incontrovertible, all-pervasive, and personal experience of the boundless freedom and compassion that is as natural an outlook informing all of one's actions as it is for ordinary beings to experience themselves and the world as real, dualistic, and suffering. So the point here being that the realization, and this has come up many times, the realization, the sort of view of the karikas, profound and vast as it may be, needs to be translated into your own mind, into your own understanding, on a deeply experiential level that becomes completely second nature, or perhaps we could say first nature. And Yogacara is, I believe, an attempt to do that, more of a sartoriologically oriented system than Madhyamaka's, more philosophically minded project.
Thank you, Chris. First nature, second nature, three natures.
Three natures.
And
Let me tell you about three natures. My gosh.
So he goes into a very nice presentation on the wisdoms that the eight consciousnesses scheme transitions into, and discusses the non-transition the transition that never takes place in reality, but seems to, and the transformation of those consciousnesses into the wisdoms and the three kayas of the Buddha. Any final comments or questions or suggestions? Ideally, we have at least, as Morgan expressed, having encountered these three natures numerous times and still not really accepting them, let's say. He said understanding them, but I think he understands them, but doesn't quite understand how they can be accepted by people like a Sangha, who's a second level bodhisattva. So as we encounter them, they become more and more familiar, and ideally more have more utility. Anything else? So let us conclude with our dedication of the vast sums of merit. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may it free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of every dense wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, Chris and Derek.
Especially those of you who don't go along with what we read. I love that. Thank you, Morgan. Take care. Be careful. It's dune season out there, and next week it will still be dune season. Yeah, it will actually be the night
Neutral.
before. Yeah, it's the neutral day. Yeah, the neutral day when you clean your house and your shrine, your tea bowl, and your incense bowl. You can clean once a year on those days. Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.